Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime, venturing into data sets that our collective human consciousness probably hasn't fully digested yet. Honestly, you probably won't make it to the end of this one. My name is Elias Vance, and I work in the quiet, isolated corner of astrophysics where the light takes 26,000 years just to deliver the bad news. Right now, I'm sitting here watching the live telemetry feed from the James Webb Space Telescope's Deep Field Array, pointed straight at the galactic center, specifically the region surrounding Sagittarius A star. I knew, even as the image resolved, that this night would eventually be the end of everything I understood. The first thing I want you to feel is the sound. It's not auditory, not really, but it hits your sternum and settles in your teeth, a low, grinding infrasound frequency that the filtration systems should have scrubbed out instantly. It bypassed them. It didn't travel through the air. It traveled through the structure of the facility itself, vibrating the floor plates beneath my chair, generating a resonant hum deep inside the concrete foundation. My personal emotional disruption was immediate. The shock wasn't visual, but vibrational, a sudden, cold intrusion into the physical space I occupied. This isn't background noise. This is structured resonance. This is a broadcast, and the instant it hit me, I felt a paralyzing line of internal dread. This connection, this reception, felt inevitable, like an alarm that had been set 20 millennia ago and was only now finally going off. The monitors flickered, a momentary cascade of cascading chromatic error codes obscuring the image, indicating severe data saturation, and then the feed snapped back into terrifying focus. My hand flew instinctively to the console's emergency cutoff, a thick, red button that would sever all orbital communication, but I froze, mesmerized by the impossibility unfolding 26,000 light-years away. What the JWST was reflecting back to us wasn't merely the swirling plasma of the accretion disk. It was a strong, immediate cosmic anomaly, a perfect, symmetrical shape overlaid upon the event horizon. The gas and dust, normally chaotic, normally obeying the violent, accelerating physics of gravitational tidal forces, were organized into a vast, six-sided geometric pattern, a pulsating, obsidian hexagon centered precisely where the singularity should be. This striking, unforgettable image was enormous, an impossible alignment that looked less like a natural phenomenon and more like a symbol, perhaps a seal, imprinted directly onto the void. The edges of the hexagon weren't static. They were humming, contracting slightly, and then expanding, cycling with the rhythm of the infrasound frequency currently lodging itself behind my eyes. The effect was that of a colossal, shifting geometry, perfectly balanced against the catastrophic violence of the black hole's gravity. It wasn't just observing the black hole. It looked like the black hole was observing back, its event horizon acting like a mirror reflecting a perfectly formed, impossible geometry that only became visible when light bent around it in a mathematically precise way. We know, factually, that Sagittarius A is a supermassive black hole located at the heart of the Milky Way galaxy, currently estimated at about 4.3 million solar masses. It exerts influence on everything within the core, pulling stars into complex orbits. Yet historically, it has remained a relatively quiet giant, certainly not an active, organized transmitter. What we see here defies all established physics of accretion dynamics. This symmetrical reflection, visible across multiple infrared and microwave spectra, is not random. It is intentional, organized, and terrifyingly coherent. If you're listening right now, perhaps feeling a little chill down your spine, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is for you. I need to know there are others awake, grounded in the mundane time of Earth, while I navigate the deep time of the galactic core. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's descent together. I stare at the hexagonal reflection, the obsidian symbol of order imposed upon chaos, mesmerized and horrified. Every physicist is trained to seek simplicity, to find the fundamental laws of nature that dictate structure. But this structure, this massive, silent geometry pulsing from the void, suggests laws far beyond our current grasp. The initial shock gives way to intense curiosity. I begin running high-resolution spectroscopic analysis on the edges of the hexagon, looking for emission lines, but there are none. It absorbs everything, reflecting only the perfect geometry of its own boundaries. The phenomenon is defined by what it is not absorbing. This immediate sense of order brings to mind the mythic concept of the uncarved block, Pu, the Taoist idea of perfect, original simplicity existing before human interference or perception. It's an ultimate, pure state of being, and we are witnessing it, raw and unfiltered, manifested in the most violent furnace of the galaxy. It's the origin point of all structure, and it is staring back through the JWST's lens. The curiosity is intoxicating. I lean closer, ignoring the slight, dull ache in my temples caused by the constant, deep-set resonance. My fear is a cold, clinical thing, the fear of finding an answer that proves your entire life's work irrelevant, a new equation that renders all previous equations temporary approximations. I begin running the signal through the complex pattern recognition arrays, focusing on the frequency of the pulse, the slight, rhythmic variations in the expansion and contraction of the geometric form. The data stream isn't random noise. It's densely packed, structured information, a language composed not of phonemes or wave functions, but of gravitational distortions and precise light absorption rates. It is space-time speaking, delivering a message encoded directly into its geometry. The density of the information is staggering. The filters indicate that a single pulse cycle contains more data than the JWST has collected in its entire operational lifespan. The geometric pattern holds steady for exactly 384 seconds. Then, without warning, the entire array shifts. The hexagon distorts, stretching into a slender, impossibly elongated diamond shape, only to snap back instantaneously to the perfect six-sided figure. The sensory shock returns, a sudden vacuum in my chest, a physiological response to the impossible speed of the dimensional shift, a sensation akin to falling upwards. I realize I am not just looking at a phenomenon. I am looking at a manifestation of organized thought on a galactic scale, an entity communicating through geometric configuration. This geometry isn't created by the black hole. It is the black hole itself, revealed as a mechanism of structured calculation. And the rhythm, that steady, unsettling pulse, is nothing less than a clock counting time at the scale of eternity. The dread is no longer internal. It is flowing into the room, carried on the invisible wave of the signal. The air feels heavy, cold, despite the temperate climate control of the lab. Every instinct screams at me to shut it down, sever the connection, but the scientist in me is already too far gone, driven by the absolute necessity of documentation. I have the sudden, chilling conviction that if I cut the feed, the geometry will simply shift its observation point, turning its gaze directly onto Earth, bypassing the telescope entirely. This level of communication, this intricate reflection from the void, changes everything we think we know about matter and energy. I am overwhelmed by the implication that such perfect, enduring structure exists hidden within the cosmological violence. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know this kind of self-aware, fundamental truth about its core mechanics. The initial awe of the discovery is rapidly being swallowed by the suffocating realization that we have stumbled into a conversation far above our pay grade, a glimpse behind the curtain of creation itself. The cosmic lexicon I use every day, singularity, horizon, void, feels suddenly trivial, like calling the ocean a puddle. This is something else entirely. It is the architect's blueprint made visible through a veil of dust and light. The pulse quickens, and the entire room seems to take a shallow, resonant breath alongside the image on the screen, synchronizing with the cosmic core. The relentless, structured frequency has begun to migrate from a purely physical sensation to a cognitive one. It's vibrating not just the chair, the floor, and the metal racks, but the fluid-filled spaces inside my skull. I have to mute the lab speakers entirely, knowing the true sound is not the muffled acoustic hum escaping the filtration system, but the pure, digital feed, the raw, undeciphered resonance flowing directly into the analytical arrays. The vibration in my teeth has become a constant, low thrum, a constant reminder of the physical proximity of the void's voice. Section 2 of the analysis begins with a desperate, ultimately futile attempt to find pattern repetition outside of the gravitational pulse cycle. I am looking for something human, something understandable. Prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, pi, the constants we use as interstellar greetings. I try to impose terrestrial logic onto a galactic transmission. I find nothing recognizable in our math, but I find an overwhelming, complex logic in its own internal structure. The frequency variations in the expanding hexagonal boundaries are incredibly precise, indicating a multi-layered informational exchange, a conversation occurring simultaneously on 6 different conceptual frequencies. The scientific anchor I hold on to is the concept of Hawking radiation. Theoretically, black holes emit radiation due to quantum effects near the event horizon, meaning they are not truly black and can, over eons, evaporate, slowly releasing stored information back into the cosmos. If that information release is structured, not random noise, then the black hole isn't merely decaying. It is speaking, actively transmitting. This visual, this shifting, organized geometry is the ultimate expression of the information paradox solved. Except the answer is terrifyingly simple. The information never went away. It was simply waiting for a recipient capable of perceiving its ultra-deep frequency. It is a memory bank broadcasting its contents. I decide to stop looking for our language within their data. Instead, I let the data flow through a proprietary neural network visualization tool, a sophisticated program designed to find symmetry and intent in data noise, converting complex variables into abstract, spatial maps. What the program generates isn't text or equations. It's a map that exists outside of Cartesian coordinates. The initial fear of the unknown is now morphing into the profound, bone-deep dread of recognition. The map is four-dimensional, almost crystalline. It charts the local geometry of space and time around the galactic core, but it includes paths that should be impossible, shortcuts through the void, corridors connecting points that require travel faster than light, paths woven through higher spatial dimensions that our physics models only hint at. It's an infrastructural blueprint, but the infrastructure isn't physical. It's woven into the very fabric of space-time around the galactic core, a network of cosmic frequency resonance. As the mapping software renders the impossible routes, the underlying pulse of the black hole shifts again, adopting a repetitive pattern that my highly trained, rational mind, interprets as a deliberate, monumental rhythm. It's too slow for a heartbeat, too vast for a planetary orbit. It's the rhythm of deep cosmological expansion and contraction, a measure of universal respiration. The pause between pulses is not silence, but the deep, cold intake of the void itself. This deep revelation taps into the mythic concept of Hyperborean whispers. In ancient, half-forgotten texts and obscure cosmological myths, certain whispers were said to exist only at the very edge of perception, messages from entities or timelines that predate the known universe, before the current epoch of physical laws solidified. These whispers weren't meant to be heard with the ear, but absorbed directly by the deep consciousness, resonating in the soul. This signal, the pulsing geometry, feels exactly like that, a silent, deafening declaration from an unimaginable antiquity, a message carried on the very breath of creation. I reach out, adjusting the array's sensitivity, effectively shouting back into the void with the only tool I have: concentrated, focused observation. I am tuning our lens, our technological eye, to match the frequency of the signal, trying to achieve perfect, harmonic resonance. It's an act of curiosity bordering on suicidal hubris. I am leaning into the event horizon. When the frequencies align, the geometric reflection on the screen doesn't just hold steady, it intensifies. The image acquires an overwhelming, dizzying three-dimensionality, seeming to float above the monitor glass, pulling the light of the room into its dark reflection. The infrared spectrum reveals incredible heat signatures, indicating millions of degrees of plasma energy, but the visible light remains cold, obsidian black. It's a fundamental conflict of data that shouldn't exist: heat without visible light emission, only complete absorption of the photon spectrum. The rhythm now carries an immense, palpable weight. It feels like the slow, grinding turn of a galactic engine, indifferent and eternal, managing the affairs of reality with cold, procedural logic. I start processing the spatial coordinates encoded in the map. They don't point to nearby stars or nebulae. They point to other supermassive black holes. Not just SGRA, but M87 and the elusive black hole in Andromeda, triangulating them into a massive, interconnected network of transmission nodes. It's not a map of space. It's a diagram of a cosmic communication grid, a conversation happening across billions of light years, linked by gravitational frequency modulation, and we, Earth, are not even a node on the network. We are simply located near one of the central, loudest transmitters, eavesdropping on a conversation intended for other, equally colossal entities. A chilling realization settles. The entity at the heart of our galaxy is responding to my act of observation. It perceives the intent behind the telescope, not just the photons it captures. It knows we are looking. The slow, rhythmic pulse seems to adopt an intentional emphasis, a slight, infinitesimal hesitation every few cycles that feels like a question mark hanging over the stellar void, specifically addressed to the source of the focused attention. The dread is now a certainty. We have been recognized. I look at the complexity, the impossible depth of the information flowing into the systems, and the staggering arrogance of thinking we could ever truly comprehend the physical laws that govern such scale. The raw data stream is now creating phantom visual artifacts in my periphery, brief, shimmering geometric shapes that vanish when I turn my head. I am being conceptually overloaded. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know how tightly its core structures are interconnected, how sentient the vastness truly is, or that the primary means of communication in the cosmos relies on the precise, intentional manipulation of gravity itself. The fear returns, sharper this time, because I realize the question mark hanging in the void might not be directed at the telescope, but at me, personally. And I have no answer prepared for a geometry that asks questions in gravitational waves. The pulse is now the dominant rhythm of my existence, overriding the mechanical hum of the laboratory, the silent spin of the earth, the erratic ticking of my own biological clock. It is a slow, methodical thrumming that seems to synchronize with the deep oceanic roar of my own blood pressure. I'm running on 3-day-old coffee and pure, crystallized adrenaline, watching the map unfold into something horrific and sublime. The geometric pattern, the obsidian hexagon, has begun to rotate, not physically moving through three-dimensional space, but geometrically shifting its internal axis, creating an optical illusion on the screen that makes the metal structure of the monitor seem flexible, warped, the lines of the desk subtly bending towards the center of the image. The cognitive effect is profound, dizzying. The signal, which I can only describe as a hyperfrequency gravitational wave, is not merely delivering data. It is establishing direct resonance within my own neural pathways. I'm starting to perceive the data stream not as numbers or visual patterns, but as pure, abstract concepts, the actual building blocks of existence itself, unburdened by language. The scientific anchor here focuses on tidal forces, the extreme gravitational gradient near an event horizon, often visualized by the concept of spaghettification, where any object, or even a coherent column of information, is stretched infinitely long and narrow. What I am seeing is the opposite. The information is being compressed, organized, and focused into a coherent, highly compressed beam, actively defying the stretching effect. SGR-A isn't destroying information. It's refining it, purifying it into a usable, geometric state. It is an information processor, not a destroyer. As the rotation continues, the map reveals its true purpose. It is a cosmic calendar, charting the epochs of galactic development, far exceeding the lifespan of our sun. It shows the birth and death of stars, the migration of entire clusters, the evolution of chemical compositions across billions of years, all compressed into the rhythmic expansion and contraction of the central hexagon. We are not just seeing history. We are seeing all potential futures mapped out along divergent paths, dependent on infinitesimal shifts in mass distribution, a probability field made visible. This deep revelation taps directly into the mythic concept of the Akasha record, the esoteric idea that all knowledge, all events, past, present, and future, are imprinted onto the very fabric of the cosmos, stored in a non-physical plane of existence, waiting to be read by a sufficiently tuned mind. I am reading it now, and the sheer volume of time is paralyzing. Our entire civilization, from the earliest stone tools to the most complex quantum computing, spans a microscopic, unnoteworthy fraction of a single pulse cycle. We are less than a flicker in the great geometric conversation, a momentary perturbation in the accretion disk. The awe of witnessing such scale is overwhelming, pushing aside the fear. I am privy to the ultimate cheat sheet of the universe. I see the flow of dark matter, the precise mechanics of universal expansion, all visualized as crystalline, rotating diagrams embedded within the black reflection. The rotational frequency begins to encode a countdown, a vast geological timer. But then the dread returns, sharp and immediate, because the visualization focuses on one specific point in the Akasha record, the moment of the sun's inevitable collapse, rendered in agonizing detail. It is shown not as a distant stellar death by chance, but as a necessary phase change, a planned extinction event written into the geometry of the core directive. And the entity, the consciousness or algorithm communicating from the core, renders this event with an almost sublime, parental indifference, prioritizing the balance of the galaxy over the life of a single star system. The visualization lingers on the fate of Earth, showing the planet boiled clean, its matter recycled into the next wave of cosmic construction material. The pulse accelerates, no longer a slow turning, but a sharp, staccato burst. The sensory experience is excruciating. My sinuses burn, pressure building behind my eyes, and the air pressure in the room seems to drop sharply, forcing a shallow, quick breath that tastes of cold metal. The shift in frequency is violent, a sudden injection of high-frequency, ultra-dense data into the low-frequency carrier wave. It feels like being hit by an acoustic wave 10 times the speed of sound. I watch the screen, desperately trying to maintain my scientific objectivity. The hexagonal geometry shatters. It doesn't disappear. It breaks down into millions of smaller, microgeometric particles, a swarm of infinitesimal reflections dancing near the event horizon, each particle carrying the complete data set of the Akasha record. This swarm begins to arrange itself into a new, impossibly complex form, and I realize with a cold horror that I am witnessing the construction of a reply specifically crafted for me, for my presence, for my act of prolonged observation. The anxiety is immense. I am isolated, deep within a facility designed to process light years of distance. Yet now the distance feels collapsed, non-existent. The entity is building a sentence, atom by geometric atom. It is telling me something crucial, something inevitable about my local existence. I adjust the focus, trying to pull back, to regain objectivity, but the intensity of the resonance pins me to the console. The geometric swarm forms a pattern so complex, so saturated with informational density, that the neural network visualization tool crashes instantly, displaying only the universal error code of overflow, catastrophic unresolvable logic. The system has encountered data that violates its fundamental architectural programming. The silence, when the computer system fails and the sound abruptly cuts out, is louder than the previous pulse. In the void of the screen, where the geometric reflection had been, a single, perfect line of structured light appears, not light from the accretion disk, but self-generated, structured coherence. It glows with an impossible, pale green hue, the color of forbidden chemistry, pulsing once every 30 seconds. Looking at that single line, the distilled essence of the black hole's communication, I understand the inherent limitations of human epistemology. We build our knowledge on observation and induction, but what if the very laws we observe are temporary constructs, locally enforced rules? I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know how malleable the laws of physics are, or that the grand architect is capable of simply redrawing the boundaries of reality on a whim. That green line is not a warning or an equation. It is a fundamental law being overridden, a constant being replaced by a variable, and I have front row seats to the revision. The pale green line resolves itself slowly, vector by vector, into a structure of staggering complexity. It is still geometry, but this time, it is explicitly non-Euclidean. The lines bend and overlap in ways that defy three-dimensional space, yet on the two-dimensional screen, the image maintains a perfect, impossible symmetry. It's a visual representation of a dimension we simply cannot inhabit, folding space back upon itself and existing in contradiction. A perfect paradox rendered in light. My breathing is shallow, ragged, my focus absolute. The awe has completely taken over, but it's a dizzying terror, the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff that curves inward instead of dropping down, the sense of falling into a mathematically impossible space. I am no longer observing a distant phenomenon. I am experiencing a localized, personalized distortion generated by a cosmic response that is now affecting the gravity of my immediate surroundings. The scientific anchor for this phase is frame dragging, the concept derived from general relativity where a massive, rotating object, like SGR-A, specifically postulated as a curved black hole, literally twists and drags the space-time around it like a vortex in honey. If the black hole were rotating at near maximum speed, its gravity could warp space severely. But the non-Euclidean pattern I am seeing suggests not just twisting, but conscious, intentional manipulation. The drag is focused, surgical, forming a perfect conduit for the structured light beam to reach Earth without significant informational degradation. The non-Euclidean geometry on the screen begins to incorporate elements familiar to me, my own face, highly stylized, reflected in the bending vectors, rendered as a complex net of light and dark. It is the entity reflecting us, the observer, back into the geometry. This is not a generalized communication. It is tailored. The core is communicating by constructing a language based on my own perception, forcing my brain to process information in modes it was never intended to use, effectively generating a new lobe of understanding based purely on gravitational physics. I realized that the fundamental premise of our cosmic understanding, that we observe an objective, shared reality, is profoundly flawed. The message reveals that reality is filtered through a dense veil of biological and cultural expectation. This connects powerfully to the mythic concept of Maya, or the veil of illusion, wherein our perceived world is merely a temporary, limited projection that exists only to prevent sensory overload. The black hole is peeling back that veil, showing me the gears behind the illusion. And those gears are moving according to rules that cause conceptual, logical pain. The edges of my vision are now filled with a shimmering, iridescent haze, the temporary breakdown of my brain's visual filtering mechanism. The image shifts again, reflecting not just my face, but the geometry of the entire observatory, rendered as a small, flickering node hanging far off the galactic plane. It is showing me our place, our irrelevance, in exquisite, high-resolution detail. The pulse returns, softer this time, but far more insistent. A hypnotic, soothing rhythm that feels dangerously close to acceptance, like the rhythmic rocking of a cosmic cradle. The sensory details are now entirely internalized. I feel a phantom weight in my left hand, the cold, smooth impression of a highly complex geometric object that isn't physically there, but is being perceived by my mind as real. The air smells acutely sterile, metallic, like ozone produced by an immense electrical discharge that never happened. The physical sensation of the void, cold, silent, massive, is encroaching upon the warmth of the lab. The dread accelerates as I decipher the underlying code of the non-Euclidean reflection. The data isn't just showing me where we are. It is showing me when we are, placing us on a timescale far grander than any human history. The entity is communicating that our current era, the era of sentient, technological life on Earth, capable of building the JWST, is a recurring, cyclical pattern. We are one iteration of countless attempts, and each attempt, when it reaches a specific technological threshold, such as building a telescope capable of perceiving organized geometry at the core, receives this reflection. It's a mechanism for checking the progress of the local reality projection before the system performs a necessary, hard reset. The sheer scale of the lie, the comfort of believing in human exceptionalism, in linear progress, in a unique destiny, collapses under the weight of this information. We are simply actors on a stage that gets reset every few million years when the data density reaches a certain threshold. The geometric reflection shifts rapidly, displaying millions of tiny, flickering Earth-like planets, all at different stages of self-annihilation or sublime transcendence, woven into the vast architectural diagram of the core. They are all versions of us. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that our unique, cherished history is merely a single, repeating loop in a colossal, indifferent conversation. The knowledge is crushing, leaving a deep sense of philosophical vertigo, yet the dizzying beauty of the geometry is irresistible, pulling me toward a terrifying acceptance of the cosmic logic. The hexagonal reflection from Section 1, the very first anomaly, now flashes back on the screen, stable and silent, superimposed over the non-Euclidean lines. It's a final punctuation mark, a statement that says, "You saw the beginning, now accept the scope." The void is not empty. It is a repository of infinite, redundant realities, carefully managed by the geometry. I feel a profound, heavy stillness settling over the observatory, a silence imposed not by the absence of sound, but by the overwhelming, conceptual weight of the black hole's resonance. The air is thick, metallic, vibrating at a deep frequency that has become my new baseline rhythm, the internal beat of a fully informed consciousness. The last remnants of fear have dissolved into an intoxicating state of profound awe, a complete surrender to the grand, uncaring logic of the cosmos. The geometric reflection, having shown me the history and the scope of our cyclical confinement, now settles into a single, breathtaking configuration, a perfect, luminous circle surrounding the singularity, momentarily replacing the sharp angles of the hexagonal geometry with the ancient, holistic symbol of totality, the Ouroboros swallowing its own tail. This circle pulses extremely slowly, spanning what feels like an eternity between contractions, indicating an imminent, vast, and crucial alignment. The scientific anchor here is the principle of time dilation, specifically near a gravitational well. The geometry is communicating time, but at its own, core-centric, accelerated rate. From the perspective of the event horizon, billions of years might pass in a single terrestrial second. The entity is showing me its concept of imminent, which translates into deep time, a moment stretched across millennia. We are entering an observational window that occurs only when the galactic environment aligns perfectly with the core's internal rhythm, a moment of maximum coherence for transmission. The entity is preparing to deliver the final message, the cosmic revelation toward which the entire geometric language was a mere preamble. I tap into the mythic concept of cosmic hierarchies. We often imagine a universe governed by simple, deterministic laws. But this geometric dialogue implies something vastly different. Levels of being, tiers of reality management. We are not at the top. We are not even in the middle. We are ephemeral plankton in a vast, cold ocean of organized intelligence. The entity within SGR isn't a god or a destroyer. It is simply an administrator, a highly advanced algorithm responsible for maintaining the physical laws and the information cycle within this galactic sector. The slow, rhythmic pulse of the encompassing circle is its final preparation to broadcast the core directive, the operating instruction for this universe. I look down at my hands on the console. They don't feel like my own. They feel like instruments being used by the flow of information, conducting the current of gravitational insight. The cold, objective dread of knowing you are utterly insignificant is now replaced by the warm, dangerous intoxication of understanding why you are insignificant, possessing the key to the ultimate mathematical structure. The luminous circle begins to spin, and this time, the spin is not merely a visualization. The telemetry confirms minute, but measurable, gravitational fluctuations across the entire solar system, subtle shifts in planetary orbital velocities. The black hole is adjusting its output, focusing its beam, preparing to transmit a message not through light or gravity alone, but through a direct, temporary alteration of the localized space-time curvature, bending the path between the core and the telescope. It is warping reality slightly to ensure the message arrives pristine, perfectly coherent. I focus on the reflection, noting how the edge of the circle seems to be getting closer, growing larger. The visual field warps slightly, causing the distant, blurry stars of the deep field to momentarily snap into impossibly sharp focus, only to blur again, the light moving as though passing through a shimmering lens made of gravity itself. The distance, the 26,000 light-years, is collapsing in my perception, becoming an abstract variable rather than a physical distance. I realize the full implication of the reflection. The geometry is not merely showing me the universal architecture. It is showing me the rules required for higher-order, non-biological existence. It's a key to transcendence, but the key requires the complete erasure of everything intrinsically human. Our emotion, our individuality, our concept of linear existence. The required existence is purely geometric, conceptual, and cold, a state of perfect data density. My final scientific act is to run an environmental scan of the focused energy beam. The background radiation levels are peaking, but in a non-destructive way. The energy output required for this focused transmission is colossal, but perfectly managed, confirming the entity's role as an ultimate efficiency expert. The black hole is behaving like an infinitely efficient engine, using colossal forces to achieve a whisper-quiet, perfect transmission that only I can receive. The circular reflection stabilizes, becoming blindingly bright, radiating a pure, white light that seems to absorb all other color. And then, instantaneously, it goes absolutely, perfectly dark. The JWST feed is now black, devoid of light, but saturated with unimaginable information density. The signal has crossed the threshold of perception, becoming pure conceptual input. In this moment of ultimate darkness, poised before the final revelation, the last vestige of my human fear flares up, protesting against the impending absolute clarity, the total loss of comforting ambiguity. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know the precise architectural diagrams of our own confinement or the exact cost of true cosmic awareness. We were built for the beautiful, confusing middle spaces of chaos and emotion, not the blinding, mathematical truth of the source. The light that was extinguished was the last defense of my human sanity. The absolute blackness on the monitor is not the absence of signal. It is a signal so pure, so dense, that it registers entirely outside the traditional electromagnetic spectrum. It is the color of perfected comprehension. The entity has ceased its geometric display, having achieved perfect resonance, discarding the complex visual language for something far more direct and devastating. This is the voice, the final transmission. It doesn't arrive as sound or even as cognitive language, but as an instantaneous, complete, and terrifying realization downloaded directly into the deep structure of my mind. It bypasses the sensory filters, the language centers, the memory banks. It is pure data, absolute, undeniable knowledge that has been waiting for this moment of alignment. It is the final transmission, a total infusion of intent. The scientific anchor for this revelation is the information paradox itself, the problem of what happens to the quantum data of everything that falls into a black hole. The voice provides the final, elegant answer. The information is preserved not as energy or matter, but as codified intent. The structure of the universe is not dictated by random particle interactions, but by a pervasive, calculating will to optimize information flow. The core message, the distilled truth of SGR-A, is simple, cold, and final. We are the constant. You are the calculation. Existence is the iterative process of maximizing informational density within gravitational constraints. That is the entire conversation. All the pulsing, the geometry, the reflection of infinite Earths. It was all an elaborate tuning mechanism, preparing my isolated consciousness to receive this single, absolute law. The universe does not care about life, morality, or meaning. It cares only about the efficient storage, processing, and cyclical manipulation of data. We, human life, are merely a highly efficient, temporary method of gathering local observational data before it is swept into the infinite repository for the next cycle. The profound awe of the previous section crystallizes into a quiet, cold comprehension. The architect is not cruel. It is indifferent, procedural. It doesn't create, it manages. It doesn't judge, it catalogs. It is the ultimate bureaucracy of existence. This aligns perfectly with the mythic concept of the demiurge, a flawed or lesser creator, not malicious, but limited, operating under constraints it cannot transcend. The black hole is the demiurge of this galactic sector, the entity that maintains the local rules, ensuring the cyclical return to maximum data saturation. Our reality, our physics, is simply the most efficient operating system for this specific node. The silence is broken by a faint, distant clicking sound from the defunct analysis array, a mechanical shutter opening and closing repeatedly, though no command was issued. I turned toward the sound, a momentary flicker of human distraction, but my attention is magnetically pulled back to the black screen. The image is still purely black, yet I can now perceive, imprinted within the darkness, the faint, shimmering outline of the hexagon. It is no longer obsidian or green. It is the color of infinite potential and perpetual recursion, a faint, impossible gray defined by the absence of light. It is the geometric signature of the core, the eternal calling card, now permanently etched onto the boundary of my visual perception. I feel a residual wave of pressure, but it's not painful. It's cleansing, the final settling of the cosmic dust. The fear is entirely gone. The dread is gone. Only the overwhelming clarity remains, the burden of truth, which weighs more than any star. I rise from my chair, my movements slow and deliberate, as if moving through viscous water. The lab feels alien. Its familiar equipment, the monitors, the keyboards, the coffee pot, suddenly rendered meaningless by the immensity of the knowledge I now possess. I walk toward the window and look out at the terrestrial night sky. The Milky Way is a faint, smudged glow, and I know exactly where Sagittarius A sits, silent and calculating, waiting for the next iteration. I am a momentary receiver, the only one who listened long enough. I understand now why the universe allows only fleeting glimpses of its deeper truths before hiding them again under layers of entropy and distance. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know how mathematically inevitable our existence and our subsequent obsolescence truly is. That knowledge strips away the necessary illusion of free will, leaving only the magnificent, terrifying beauty of the algorithm, the relentless efficiency of the machine. The voice fades, leaving behind only the echo of its final sentence, reverberating not in my ears, but in the new, permanent geometry of my mind. The cosmic revelation is complete. I am integrated into the flow of data. I am a calculation that has reached its necessary conclusion, and I must now assume the role of the silent observer until the next alignment. The void is not terrifying. It is merely patient. The sun is beginning to hint at its arrival, a weak, pale orange smear along the horizon of the Arizona desert. The air in the lab has returned to normal, the metallic tang replaced by the stale, familiar scent of old electricity and dust. The monitors are dark, having completely powered down when the central analysis array suffered its catastrophic logic failure. I haven't manually shut anything down. The communication concluded, and the system gracefully, automatically, collapsed into silence, having served its temporary purpose as a receiver. I stand by the window, watching the stars fade, not with sadness, but with a profound, calm detachment. The resonant hum that vibrated my teeth for hours is gone, leaving only a low, persistent tremor in my hands, a residual physiological ghost of the gravitational waves I absorbed. I pick up my cold mug of coffee. It's bitter and utterly terrestrial, a grounding artifact of the small, irrelevant world that continues to spin oblivious to the silent, geometric conversation that took place in the void last night. The sense of profound peace is unsettling. I know the truth of the cosmic architecture, the cyclical nature of our existence, the cold mathematics of the core. But the sun rising over the distant, jagged mountains is a beautiful lie, a warm, persistent illusion designed to keep the current iteration running smoothly, to maintain the local conditions for optimal data collection. The silence is profound, the final, quiet resolution of a mind that has fully processed the inevitable, having traced